When a homeless man approached Senator JD Vance on the streets asking for just $1, no one could have predicted what would happen next. It was a moment that seemed simple on the surface. A man in need reaching out for help. But what unfolded left bystanders and the internet stunned. Vance, a public figure known for his rise from poverty to the Senate, could have simply handed over a bill and walked away. Instead, he stopped, looked the man in the eyes, and asked a question. "What's your name?" The homeless man, taken aback, hesitated before replying, "James." Vance nodded and continued, "James, tell me something. What's the hardest part about your situation right now?" James shifted uncomfortably, as if he wasn't used to being asked such a question. "Man, everything. No place to sleep, no food half the time. People don't even look at me. It's like I don't exist." For a moment, Vance was silent. Then he reached into his pocket, not for a single dollar, but for his wallet. He pulled out a $20 bill and handed it to James. But that wasn't all. "What are you doing tomorrow morning?" Vance asked. James furrowed his brows, confused. "I don't know. Same thing as today, I guess." Vance then said something that stunned not only James, but also the people around them. "Meet me at this diner at 8 a.m. Breakfast is on me. Let's talk." James blinked, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Most people either ignore him or toss a dollar his way and move on. But this man, a U.S. senator, was offering him something far greater than money, his time. The next morning, James arrived at the diner, unsure of what to expect. And true to his word, Vance was there, already seated at a booth. A waitress brought over 2 steaming cups of coffee as James sat down. For the next hour, they talked. James opened up about his life, how he had once worked construction before an injury left him unable to do physical labor. With medical bills piling up and no family to turn to, he ended up on the streets. Vance listened intently, nodding occasionally, but never interrupting. And then, he did something that left James speechless. Pulling out his phone, Vance made a call right then and there. "Hey, I need to ask a favor. Do you know if there are any job openings for someone with experience in construction?" James's eyes widened. Within minutes, Vance had arranged for James to meet with someone from a local organization that helped people get back on their feet. Not just for a job interview, but also for temporary housing assistance. As they finished breakfast, James sat there in stunned silence. Finally, he spoke. "Why are you doing this?" Vance smiled and said, "Because someone once helped me when I was down. It's only right I do the same." James's story doesn't end there. Over the next few weeks, with the support he received, he was able to secure a job and a place to stay, and it all started with a simple request for $1. This story isn't just about JD Vance. It's about the power of seeing people for who they are, not just their circumstances. It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a life. What do you think about this moment? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories. When James first approached JD Vance, he had no idea that his life was about to take a drastic turn. To him, it was just another day on the streets, another request for spare change, another moment of hoping, praying that someone would acknowledge his existence. But what happened next wasn't just an ordinary interaction. It was something that would stay with James for the rest of his life. After their breakfast meeting, Vance didn't just walk away and forget about James. No, he followed up. Later that day, he personally contacted a few organizations that specialized in helping the homeless get back into the workforce. He called in a few favors, reached out to contacts, and made sure that James wasn't just another statistic. Within 48 hours, James had an appointment at a job placement center. When he walked in, nervous but hopeful, he was met with something he hadn't felt in years: respect. A woman named Sarah, who worked at the center, greeted him warmly. "Senator Vance told us about you," she said. "Let's get you set up." James was given a full evaluation, not just to determine what kind of work he could do, but also to find out what support he needed to stay off the streets. They helped him replace his worn-out ID, set up a bank account, and even scheduled a medical checkup to address his lingering injuries. And then, the breakthrough moment happened. A construction company that partnered with the job center had an opening for a site assistant, a role that didn't require heavy lifting but still allowed James to use his skills. When they offered him the position, James was in shock. "Are you serious?" he asked, barely able to process what was happening. The hiring manager smiled. "We all need a fresh start sometimes." That night, James slept in a bed for the first time in months. The job placement center had arranged for him to stay in temporary housing until he could afford his own place, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar: hope. But here's where the story takes an even more unexpected turn. A few weeks later, JD Vance followed up again. Not through an assistant, not through a generic email, he called James personally. "How's the job treating you?" he asked. James, sitting in his modest new apartment, nearly dropped the phone. "You actually remembered me?" Vance laughed. "Of course I did. I wanted to make sure you're doing okay." James took a deep breath. He looked around at the small but comfortable space he now called home. "Man, I don't even have words. I don't know how to thank you." Vance's response? "Just pay it forward when you can." James promised he would. And he did. Months later, he started volunteering at the same job center that helped him get back on his feet. He shared his story with others, encouraging them to keep going no matter how tough things got. The ripple effect of one simple act of kindness had changed not just one life, but many. This story isn't just about JD Vance. It's about what happens when people choose to see each other, to help instead of ignore, to give someone a real chance instead of just loose change. So the next time you see someone struggling, remember this: you never know how much of a difference you can make. Let us know what you think in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment of unexpected kindness? We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More inspiring stories are coming your way. As James settled into his new job and life started to regain a sense of normalcy, he often found himself reflecting on that fateful moment, the day he asked JD Vance for a single dollar. That moment had changed everything. But what James didn't know was that his story was far from over. A few months after starting his job, James received another unexpected call, this time from a local news station. Word had spread about his encounter with JD Vance, and reporters wanted to share his story. At first, James was hesitant. He wasn't looking for attention. He had simply been trying to survive. But then he thought about all the people still living on the streets, people who felt invisible just like he once had. Maybe, just maybe, his story could inspire change. So, he agreed to the interview. When the segment aired, it didn't take long for it to go viral. People across the country were moved by James's journey. By the way, one moment of kindness had created a chain reaction that transformed his life. But there was one person who was watching with a particularly keen interest: his younger sister, Maria. James hadn't seen or spoken to Maria in nearly a decade. Life had pulled them in different directions, and he had always been too ashamed to reach out, especially once he became homeless. But when Maria saw his story on TV, she didn't hesitate. She picked up the phone and called the news station, hoping they could put her in touch with him. When James answered her call, his voice cracked. "Maria." "It's me, James," she said, choking back tears. "I've been looking for you for years." They spoke for hours, catching up on lost time. Maria, now a nurse, had a family of her own. She had been searching for James, always, wondering if he was okay. When they finally met in person, the reunion was emotional. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore," Maria told him. For James, those words meant everything. Meanwhile, JD Vance had been keeping up with James's progress. When he saw the news story about the reunion, he reached out again. "Looks like you're making waves," Vance said with a chuckle. James laughed. I never thought asking for $1 would lead to all this." Vance's response was simple, but profound. Sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest impact. And he was right. James's story continued to inspire others. People who had once ignored the homeless started to see them differently. Donations to local shelters increased. Businesses began offering second chances to those who had fallen on hard times. And James, he never forgot where he came from. In addition to his job, he became a mentor at the very same employment center that had helped him. He shared his story with those who were struggling, offering them not just advice, but hope. And every now and then, when he passed someone on the street asking for help, he didn't just drop $1 into their hands, he stopped, just like JD Vance had stopped for him. He asked their name. He listened, because he knew firsthand how much that could mean. So, what started as a simple request for $1 became a story of redemption, human connection, and the power of kindness. It proved that no matter how far someone falls, with the right support and a little compassion, they can rise again. And all it took was one person choosing to care. What do you think? Could something as small as a conversation really change a life? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of the good in the world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.